Hey guys, welcome to Crypto. Really excited to have you with us. We've got an awesome show tonight. We're going to be doing the headlines, talking about stupid stories, fun stories, not the boring, usual rubbish that you hear everywhere. We've got Crap Crypto, where we're going to be identifying, talking about some of the crap projects. And we have got the Clash. We've got Kurt with us, talking about a little tiff on X that we love to see. So really excited to get into it. And come and join us. Hit that like, because obviously it doesn't cost anything just to hit that like. And we'd really appreciate a little subscribe as well. It's a new show, new channel, and any support is hugely appreciated. But guys, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it. Kurt, thanks for joining me. I know it's a last minute thing just there. I know exactly what it's like with families and things like that. We were just saying how this is like a lastminute.com rush around.
Well, good to be here. I sorry, I'm get everyone's blood pressure up first, but family first at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, let's just quickly, before we dive into the headlines, I want to just let's just do a quick round table, introduce the audience to everybody. I think that's always a nice little way to start off. Kurt, do you want to fire away?
Sure. So I'm Kurt Wuckert Jr. I've been a Bitcoiner since 2012. Been an entrepreneur since before then. Do a whole bunch of stuff. I'm a former cybersecurity pen tester. I was a red team leader. So used to do big takedowns. It was a big New York firm, so we were basically trying to take down banks and hedge funds and that kind of stuff. All white hat, and then they would we would write a report at the end and say, well, here's how we got into the CEO's laptop, for example. But so that kind of thing. Got into Bitcoin mining pretty early. 2013, I started my first mining operation. I do a bunch of hash power consulting now. We've built out 7 pretty big mining operations in the last 18 months. And that includes everything from site acquisition, full build out, etc. I also run a BSV focused mining pool, and we do software dev, architecture, smart contract design, and all Bitcoin related stuff. So we don't do any of the ETH stuff. It's no copy pasta. We build Bitcoin focused technology, and I'm full time. I also you see CoinGeek over my shoulder here. My day gig. I'm the chief Bitcoin historian with CoinGeek. So I sort of got into that by accident, but I basically tell the stories that everybody wishes people wouldn't talk about so much, which has made me popular with some and unpopular with others. But
well, listen, we'll dive into that with the Clash, because I can't wait to get into this business. I find it hilarious. I really do. But Will, just a quick intro. Will's joining me again. Say hi.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for having me again. I'm looking forward to this. To be fair, Ben's picked up the conversation today, so I'm excited. Yeah, so my name's Will Lamington.
No pressure.
No pressure. My name's Will Lamington. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Bar Media. We're despite the media in the name, because we've transitioned slightly, we're a software development agency, and we focus on building software for startups. So newly funded startups will work on their applications, and we have a massive heavy focus in technologies, namely crypto, Web3, but also AI, AR, VR, all that good stuff. So,
awesome. Listen, guys, we've got a lot to get through. We've got headliners. Love to hear your views on these. And we've got then crypto crap, and I want to get to the Clash, because that's where the fun's going to be at the end. So just to give the audience an idea of the sort of schedule. So so I like to just sort of identify some of the funny, interesting stories. So if anybody has interesting stories or funny stories, please do share them, because there's lots of crypto stuff, lots of news, and it's always sort of a bit, geeky, a bit sort of techy, bit, macroeconomics and all that sort of stuff. So we like to try and make it a little bit more interesting. So first story of the day, boys. Don't know if you've had a chance to look at these, and don't worry if you don't. Sometimes it's a bit of fun just to go off the cuff. So we've got Ferrari to officially accept crypto as payment for its supercars. So what do you make of this, boys?
Well, let Kurt go first, because he's new to the table.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like every year or two, there's a few big brands. I remember the first big one had to have been 2014 or 15 was Microsoft. And they made a big announcement. Oh, we're accepting Bitcoin. And
I didn't know that.
It was a huge celebration, and then it was backpedaled, and it was it's only for digital items, and then it's only for this, and then it was dropped like a year and a half later. Like, okay, nobody bought anything with Bitcoin, and so we dropped support. And then we've seen dozens, maybe hundreds of big brands do that since. So I'd be very curious to see, is this a publicity stunt, which I feel like it typically is, or was Ferrari getting some kind of pressure? Like, hey, I would definitely buy a Ferrari if I could pay with my whatever my coin is. So I guess we'll see.
Definitely. Will, what's your take on the story?
I mean, much the same as Kurt's. You see it. I didn't know about the Microsoft one, to be fair, but you see every few years companies. It's more often. I think the biggest and probably the one that people will most remember is obviously Tesla and Elon Musk saying that they're going to accept. They're going to accept Doge. I think he even went with. And obviously that was all publicity. And it's an interesting thing, and I think it sort of paves the way for there probably is some vision in there behind it. It's interesting. I've got the article up on my screen now as well. So they're planning to accept BTC, ETH, and XRP, which is an interesting kind of three of the main big ones, to be fair.
And it's also interesting, I think, do you think, in the sense of how the news is all coming out now, when 6 months away from the halving. I definitely sense there's much more sort of positivity in the overall market, and I guess they're possibly sort of jumping ahead of the curve on that, maybe.
It's actually, so that's pretty smart, because most brands, Tesla, for example, when they made their announcement, that's kind of the thing that pushed the BTC price from the 30,000s up into the 60,000s. So it was sort of like the blow off the top moment, and wouldn't you know it, accepting BTC in the 60,000s for a Tesla and then holding those coins would have been bad for the balance sheet. But to Ferrari's credit, they might be pretty wise if they can get a few people to buy now, and then they're holding coins through the next bull cycle. So at least somebody over there might understand the timing opportunity.
Yeah. Also, I was just going to say, also, there's going to be that all everyone wants to buy a Lambo, don't they? But now it's going to be everyone wants to buy a Ferrari.
Pretty sharp.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, reading on, one of the biggest, obviously, concerns for accepting payments in terms of certainly something like Bitcoin is the amount of volatility in prices. And again, they seem to have thought of that. This is another sign that they're trying to take it a bit more seriously, is they're going to be using BitPay to kind of curb that volatility. So again, I guess that's a sign to me that they're going to be taking this as a much more serious payment method, instead of just a good publicity stunt for the moment.
Right, boys, I'm going to move on to the next story, just because I'm conscious of time and all the rest of it. Right, hopefully that's showing. Let's have a look. Yes, it is. Look at that. I'm getting there with the tech. So, what do you make of this? Sam Trabucco made 25 million during the FTX fraud and built a lavish property empire. But Sam Bankman-Fried's missing math camp friend faces no charges. So, where is Alameda's former co-CEO? That is the question.
It's funny. You hear occasionally about clawbacks. This is when people successfully exit a Ponzi scheme, and then 18 months later you have prosecutors saying, hey, that $100,000 you left with, that wasn't your money. Those are complicated, but it is an interesting situation with FTX specifically, because I think there's so many people that were involved in that organization, and it was a small organization. It really was only a dozen people with any operational control, if you could call it that. But
and they were all committing fraud. It's amazing.
How could you not be? I mean, it's the way that place ran. It was literally like, okay, I hold a C-level title at 2 different companies, and we're commingling funds, and just the whole thing. Even just your basic premise stuff was fraudulent. So I don't know, but maybe he was the first guy to make a plea deal, and maybe he's the reason Sam got busted in the first place. Even so. I think that kind of stuff.
I heard he's on some sort of big yacht somewhere in the Caribbean or somewhere like that. I don't know.
Could be. I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, these things. We saw Caroline initially. Caroline Ellison, whatever she was, some C-level. Yeah, and she, she was quiet until all of a sudden Sam showed up in New York, and then she's like, "Oh man, I better go to the DA first, because."
Suddenly
sell
everyone
meat on the river. You know? Yeah,
Definitely,
no good.
definitely. I mean, this is a story that just keeps on giving, and I know, you know, it's obviously sad. We've talked about it before. Lots of people lost money, but you know, I think it's always good to sort of remind people, especially if they're getting new into crypto. They might have not seen it, heard it, been aware of it, and just being sort of prudent and cautious. Yeah. So let's dive into the next story. Right, what have we got? Here we go. So Taylor Swift adds crypto payment option for film tickets. You a Taylor Swift fan, Kurt?
Not in the typical sense, no. I don't know. Again, this is the same thing as Ferrari to me. Like, there's basically no difference here.
Yeah, let's move swiftly on because that's not that exciting.
Double entendre, it's killer.
Definitely. Okay, Sega executive says blockchain gaming, an unknown world worth exploring. So again, Kurt, it's probably a similar sort of story here, really, isn't it? It's bit more mainstream adoption.
Yeah. So gaming is one of these things that I think is really key, actually. Like, this is a sector of the economy where you don't have to build all kinds of extra infrastructure in order for people to participate, where, you know, retail payments requires banking stuff and exchanges and you know, companies like BitPay. But with a company like Sega, if they just wanted to give give away items as NFTs like mid game, that technology is there, and that's actually quite easy. So I think for all the people that make these sort of blockchain native games, and I know a few blockchain native video game developers, I always ask them, okay, do you want to compete with Sega, Nintendo, and Electronic Arts and some of these other companies, or are you trying to build an MVP that ultimately gets you absorbed into a bigger company? Because that's a huge opportunity. Now, that might even be what Sega's looking at. They might be putting out this as a sort of flag to say, hey, if you're have a tech stack here, give us a call. We're interested in blockchain. Like, there could be people today calling and saying, hey, here, we've got a bunch of IP. Maybe we've got some interesting patents, that kind of thing. Like, buy us, give us $50 million and bring us into your company. We'll be your blockchain module at Sega. So I think this is really cool. That's really good stuff.
Awesome. Will, how about you, mate?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the projects coming out into the kind of blockchain gaming space, are starting to look more and more sophisticated, more and more like kind of well thought out and well considered. And I think it's only a matter of time before kind of big companies like Sega will start to clock on to, again, like, for example, like we were looking at it at the last episode we did together, but actually on a deeper dive, there's a new one that some of these projects, these crypto gaming, blockchain gaming projects, are having some serious like money put through them and serious like considered development to them. So I think it's only a matter of time before it hits the mainstream with existing companies like Sega.
Definitely. Awesome. Okay, last headline. We've got Scaramucci optimistic on Bitcoin's future and 15 trillion potential.
What's the context?
Are you a fan of Scaramucci, Kurt?
I wouldn't say I hate him, but I think anyone that comes out with a big number, I mean, this is just about headlines, and it always is. It's the same, if Michael Saylor says something about a number, or if any, just pick. There's any one of 25 people who, if they mention Bitcoin and a number, it's going to be a headline across a few places. And I think, first of all, what's the context? I think is exactly the right question, but I think the real question is why. What is the $15 trillion potential in the space, or is it because of Sega? Is it because of Sega and Ferrari, or is it literally just because I don't know? Like, that's a big number that'll get me published in Benzinga here and move on. Like, I think
that's exactly it. I think these articles are designed as a publicity thing.
Yeah, they're clickbait.
I would go on the edge that it starts to become. You have to really. That's what I mean. It misses context, but if it's just for publicity, then I think it actually urges on a little bit irresponsible publishing this.
Perfect. All right, guys. Thanks for that. Let's round it up. Headlines. So now, moving swiftly on, we're moving on to the new segment. And at the time when we first did this, it was quite funny, but we didn't really have a name for it, Kurt. So I came up with Crap Crypto. And the premise is and this is important, I think. every investor, everybody who's involved should think of all projects as crap from the start, rather than FOMO in and just go, oh god, I've got to do it because somebody else said. So although this show's all a bit lighthearted, a bit of fun, and willing to just to hear different people's opinions and all that sort of stuff. But I think ultimately, if we have the premise of thinking that all crypto is crap, and literally everything, then we can start, pick it apart and and actually challenge it. And if we pick on a project, just to say, guys, if we pick on your project, don't take it personally, but come on the show, tell us why we're wrong, educate us. I haven't got time to dive into the weeds of every single project at all, and like most people, I think in this space, investors, retail investors, they're going to be watching to a few videos, listen to a few people, and then getting on with their busy lives. So this is just a bit of fun. But I'll tell you what, Kurt, what we usually do, just to share with you, we dive into CoinGecko just to look at the latest sort of crypto projects.
Sure.
We can happily do that, or if you've got anything that you think's crap, please share. we can have a chat about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the. It's funny. I like to think of myself as a friendly bear in maybe more ways than one, but like when I think about everything going on in the blockchain space, there's like 20, I don't know, maybe there's 25,000 cryptocurrencies or whatever that exist now. And the way I see it is they're all basically copies of one of four things. You have your Bitcoin forks and clones, you have your Ethereum forks and clones, you have Monero forks and clones, and then you have your like DAG, like your very different. So this is like everything from Byteball to IOTA to Hashgraph, the things that just do things very differently. I should give a shout out to my frenemies who shill nano on everything that I post on Twitter as well. But and that's really it. Like, so what do we actually need? The answer is we probably need fewer than 10 blockchains to accomplish anything that any blockchain can accomplish. And I am a firm believer that ultimately, like the internet protocols, everything will ultimately converge to 99.999% of use will be on one network, because network effect is what it is. And then you will have your sort of pirate radio style, maybe that's something like Monero or something like Zcash, where there's like, yeah, sure, maybe 30,000 people use it per year globally for some very specific niche, but there's 5 billion people using the other one on a daily basis. And like, that's reality. So for me, as much as I am an advocate for the technology and make my entire living in the blockchain space, I am of the opinion that almost everything in the space is absolute crap. And I mean that in the nicest way, but like, sorry, a lot of you people are just doing copy pasta because it's a really easy way to raise money, both from traditional venture capital and just from like, hey, here's a new token I launched. Like, I'll spend 30, 40 grand on ads and Twitter influencers and whatever, and we'll print a few $100 million of market cap pretty easily. So yeah, that's where I'm at conceptually in the crypto space.
Yeah, I get that. I get that completely. And for me, it's all about keeping things really simple. I got into, I know we got off sort of segment slightly because we're sort of supposed to be talking about diving into and finding some crypto crap, but we'll do that in a second because that's quite fun. But this is relevant. It's very much, I think the cycle of somebody getting new into the space, typically, and I don't know if you think differently, tell me, is you first hear about Bitcoin, get into Bitcoin, then you start looking and start researching, start hearing about other things, and then you start being clever. You think, oh, I can do this, and or you just start experimenting, I guess, but you're ultimately trying to be clever, and then you get burnt, and then you go, actually, I need to keep my life simple and not overcomplicate it.
Yep.
And that's certainly the way, sort of the road path that I've sort of followed.
For sure. And the issue, like you said, it's most people come in because they heard about Bitcoin, probably because the price has gone up recently or whatever. So naturally, you get the majority of people that are in the economy at all are people that bought high and are now, bag holders and going to either ride out the next few years until they're in profit, or they realize like, maybe I shouldn't be an investor at all. And in a lot of cases, that really is the case. But I really hate the financial aspect or sort of the financialization of Bitcoin as a concept, because truly, I mean, Bitcoin was created to reduce payment friction globally. And so while I encourage people like, yeah, spend a little Bitcoin, that kind of thing, like use the tools, most people are not doing that. And then they view it as an opportunity cost. It's, you don't want to be the guy that spent 10,000 Bitcoins on a pizza, right? And so, that makes sense. But at the same time, if it's a pure financial asset and it never actually gets used in the economy, like there's only so much bubble economics that can hold something up forever. And so if we don't come up with other things that can only be done with Bitcoin and then therefore make some excess value, I think it all goes, I think we all lose at that point. So I think it's another really important thing to take into consideration.
I find your opinion really refreshing about it. It's a really refreshing take on everything. You don't hear, well, you do hear it, but you don't as well. If you pop onto Twitter and your X, you'll see kind of the very traditional kind of Bitcoin bros opinion.
Bitcoin's going up forever, bro. Keep stacking stats.
I find your opinion very relatable and also very refreshing to hear, actually. And I think it's very true. I think you're not forgetting the kind of the roots of what the Web3 space is all about, and kind of what it's trying to do with the world, but it's also,
Right, boys. I know that.
Yeah, we're going to see.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to move on. Just we've got lots to get through. Sorry, Will, but let's go and have a look at new cryptocurrencies. This was quite funny the other day when we did this, Will, wasn't it?
It was. And Joel, I'm actually genuinely, I think we can actually bring some value to it as well, to be fair. And it'll be interesting to look at some of these projects and see what Kurt thinks. And how do you try and differentiate a good project from a bad project?
Well, this one surely is a good project because it says it's got the name guarantee. So it must be guaranteed to be good. What
Impressive. We've got. So yeah, at a glance, I mean, you're going to look at market cap versus supply, right? So why is this coin $4.71? I would guess it is a very low supply to begin with. I don't know if it specifies that here.
Total supply, 10 million.
10 million? Well, that's okay. So it's quite big. So that's, that's
10 billion. Is that 10 billion or 10 million?
It is 10 billion. Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh dear,
so fully diluted. So there's $44 billion in market cap on Guarantee Coin, which
just pop onto the website and you'll see. This is why it's just a load of shit.
Well, you can see that it's up at the top. It says the contract. The fact that it has a T indicates it is a Tron contract. So Tron, as some of you may know, is a project by a guy named Justin Sun. Justin Sun is a Chinese national, and Tron was created basically to pump and dump whatever he wanted. He can print the coins out of nowhere, and then he has used the liquidity that he's printed to buy all kinds of very interesting staking things. So he may even own CoinGecko now that I think about it. But Justin Sun has ended up buying tons and tons of real property by basically just having a coin of the week that gets printed. And, if you control Tether, which is also minted on Tron, and you control the DEX, which the contracts are Tron, contracts, you issue the coins, you control the market making contracts and stuff. You just kind of print money out of nowhere. And if you can exit into Tron Tether and you can deposit your Tron Tether over into Binance, you can convert it to ETH Tether, which is way more liquid. They're happy to have a handshake deal with very little slippage. And then you got a guy like Justin Sun, who's probably a multi-billionaire that minted entirely in the crypto space just over the last 5 or 6 years in like the most Machiavellian way possible. So that's your guarantee right there, is that Justin Sun made a lot of money.
I mean, all you got to do is pop onto the website, and they can't even get the correct, and it's
it's a WordPress template, but who cares? Because there's $44 billion in market cap.
$44 billion available coming through.
So I think I saw something like 50 grand a day in volume. So that's the actual money that's in there.
I mean, when you think about it, that's no joke amount of money.
It's absurd.
It's what shocks me is that's not. I know it's relatively small compared to some projects, but still, that's a serious amount of money going through a project, project like this.
Yeah,
it makes me wonder who's putting money through.
All right. Do you want to pick out another one that grabs your eye?
World Cause Coin. That sounds charitable.
24-hour volume, 28,000. There we go.
Now, they haven't even got a website. That's good.
Yeah.
World Cause Coin.
Well, they've got a Twitter account.
I'm looking at that. The World Cause Coin is a cryptocurrency built based on the philosophy of cause capitalism and abundance for all.
Delightful.
Bitcoin with a human face.
What were you just saying about copying everything else and just putting some fancy words before it?
Pretty much. I mean, this is just like anything else. Why does the world, need a special purpose-built money for each individual economy? Like when you're McDonald's, so even McDonald's struggles to get you to use like Big Mac dollars, and they try to do these. They've been trying to do it for 30 years, and ultimately people are like, "Dude, I'm just going to use my credit card." Yeah.
For such a refreshing take, that's so true, isn't it? Exactly. It's like for me, it's like you look at these projects and like fundamentally, what is the actual true utility? Like what's underneath? Like, why would you use this? Like outside of this one like novelty that you might offer?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing too. Like this could be a token that is, built into a real organization. Like this doesn't matter unless you like actually have organizational buy-in from pick your charity of maybe it's UNICEF or something, or whatever. Get Bono involved, whatever. Like we're gonna save Africa again, and like get just get something there that has some legitimizing factor to it, and some provenance. I mean, it's the audit trail. Like that's what makes these kind of things valuable. Like blockchains have shown us a couple good things, like things that they're truly good at, and it's money laundering, and it is illegal fundraising from unsophisticated retail investors. So if that's our reputation, again, I say this as someone who wants the stuff to succeed, but like we need mom and pop's lives to get better in order for this technology to be like, hey, I didn't get scammed this time. Maybe there's something here.
100%. I couldn't. And it seems that opinion seems relatively absent across the board. I mean, it's almost like people are mindlessly running into all the. I mean, I'm sure it's not. It's just the opinion that whenever you spend more than 5 minutes on X,
I think there's two things going on here, isn't there? I think there's one is the element of people who maybe a few things have the philosophical perspective, and are in it to try and change the world, and those people behind it are sort of willing that change, and I 100% get that. There's the other side, which are the investors, they're looking to try and make more money and all the rest of it. I get that, and I think the other side is just a bit degen side, really. It's just like they probably know deep down it's a load of bollocks, and they think, well, you know what, if I buy early and some other fool comes along later, they're hopefully going to be buying at a higher price.
Yeah,
and
there's
I mean when Lambo obviously all the time, isn't it? So I think there's that element across the board, isn't it?
There is, and there's an aspect to that is a little bit like like you don't want to be a Boy Scout about everything in the universe either. If I was a executive at an oil company or something, like is it against my own interest to invest in Tesla, like those kind of things where it's like, okay, well I have this hedge in my portfolio, but just speaking of X, like I saw an ad go by saying like buy bonds for Israel for this war that's going on right now, and I'm like, man, like the way it was advertised was so like, hey, this war will be over soon, and you're gonna make a bunch of money on this Israel bond. Like, so you have to take like all the political stuff and all the like, man, what am I actually investing in if I buy an Israel bond directly with that kind of thing, and it's just like everything else. You look at your basic cost benefit analysis versus like, am I going to burn in hell at some point, or if I'm some godless prick, like maybe the peasants are going to come tear my eyes out at some point too, and like I think that's the kind of thing that a lot of people just don't really think about very much, especially in crypto, because you have this opportunity to sit anonymously behind your laptop and just grift money out of people. And it feels really, really impersonal, especially when you're just like a good trader and that kind of thing. It just feels very like, I don't know, man, some schmuck bought this thing that I bought 6 months ago and it's going to dump on him, but he'll learn, like he'll get good at it too. He'll be me in 3 years and he'll be fine, you know? And, but it's zero sum thinking. Like it is the opposite of abundance capitalism, which to me is the sort of like Henry Ford of, hey, look, I'm going to make business across the planet 99% easier to do in a decade than it is today. And for that, I will be very rich, but the spillover benefits benefit everybody. And so like, that's the kind of business I want to be involved in. And the kind of people that just want to, again, financialize everything and just like, yeah, I don't know, like a bunch of math happens and I get really wealthy. Like that's just not, it's not the kind of business I'm in.
I think that's this sort of project, when we're on the new coins here and we're scrolling through, I think these sort of projects, they need to sort of come to an end really to really see what this technology can do and it to really blossom into its own. As you said, I kind of really resonated when you said that the world really only needs 4, 5, 6 blockchains to sort of do everything that we need to do. And I think that's when this technology will really come into its own, is when people get past this sort of money hype.
Yep, for sure.
And then the real projects will come out. Yeah, exactly.
So, Kurt, I think this is a perfect segue to move on to the final segment, which I'm sure most of the audience have been waiting for, is the clash.
Yeah.
Of course, this all started with a little X. I keep saying Twitter, but it's obviously X.
I do the same thing.
Yeah. Kara Szabo arguing whether Craig Wright is the real Satoshi, and you know, like I've said and made it perfectly clear, you know, I'm not convinced, but you know, I'm open-minded. I'm always happy to listen to the other side, and you know, I'll be an adult in the room about it rather than just sort of throw my toys around and and all the rest of it. So yeah. So, Kurt, tell us about how this all sort of all started, how it all kicked off. It was quite funny. So, everyone gets so angry on X.
Well,
don't they?
yeah.
It's just like it's that tribal fighting. It's like being in the school playground. It's hilarious.
No, it's absurd. You know, Kara. First of all, I don't know that Kara is even a real person. Like she may well be. She may well be, you know, a team of people that are out there again perpetuating sort of the crypto culture.
You start from the beginning because I've actually.
Sorry, Will. Yeah.
Kurt's had a fight on X.
Yeah, she's a you know, your typical crypto Twitter personality, AI generated profile pic, comments on everything, has 50 bots that respond to everything she says.
She looks hot though, to be fair.
She's a cartoon. She's a cartoon character. Like that is a dude in Eastern Europe. I am.
Oh no! You just blown my vision.
but it's funny because it's a very typical scam. Like this is what people do. They've been doing this for 30 years. Like, okay, look, I'm gonna take, if I just send 1 million letters out, there's gonna be some percentage of people that are just super gullible. They're going to sign up for my thing. I'm going to steal their identity or whatever. Now, I'm not saying that's what Kara is doing, but what she appears to be doing, like she's building social clout on X. And so after a certain point, your account becomes valuable. You can A, sell your account. B, you can sell the opportunity to shill. So it can be like, yeah, I'll pump your coin. Like wire me $50,000 and I'll spend 3 weeks doing nothing but talking about your project and whatever else. Or you have the like, hey, join my Telegram group. I'm going to give you exclusive trade signals. It costs $10,000 a month. And like, you grift money out of people this way across crypto Twitter.
I think you're definitely right to pick that up. But on the Kara point, has she got a point though?
About Craig?
Yeah.
So here's the thing.
When did this start? Sorry. So
basically.
She tagged me. I can tell the story. She tagged me for some reason. So I guess you kind of have to have a little bit of predicate knowledge about Craig. Craig Wright is an Australian computer scientist who was outed in 2015 by Wired and Gizmodo magazine as he's probably Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah.
Then it turned into, then he's on BBC and he didn't do the signing properly, and okay, maybe he's a fraud, and just all this stuff. So it was like this giant bluster several years ago, and they kind of disappeared for a while. But while he disappeared, turns out he was building a research and development firm in London called nChain, which today has like 3,500 patents on blockchain technology.
Wow.
And it's a lot of really novel things. It's also a lot of stuff that is kind of passe if you're in the crypto space, and they're like, okay, yeah, blockchains can do that, sure. But there's some really novel stuff about all kinds of other special things you can do, like bootstrapping a new internet over Bitcoin and you know, stuff like that. And so people still really, really don't want Craig to be Satoshi Nakamoto because they don't like him. And he's very much kind of the way I have been, just very opposed to the crypto pump and dump culture. He's just like, no, spend $100 million of your own money and lose money for a decade because you believe in the world that we're building, right? And so that kind of flies in the face of the scammer culture. But then you have the people that just think, he's just trying to like kill Bitcoin. Is a very common criticism, is that he's suing open source developers and he's this patent troll and he's this liar. Like if he was Satoshi, he could very trivially prove he's Satoshi. So then he's kind of playing that and trying to raise money from other people. And so there's a lot of controversy around Craig. Craig, quite frankly, is the most controversial person in the blockchain economy. So for me, I work in the BSV economy, which BSV is primarily where Craig is doing his work.
Yeah.
So like we get associated to each other tangentially. I know Craig, like I have, had dinners with him. I've worked with him on things in the past. So we get this association where it's like, oh, Kurt's just, I'm the paid troll that works for Craig. That's the presumption from the outside. And so she jumped on it. She just started criticizing Craig and then criticizing me by proxy and tagging me in a bunch of criticism. She also calling me fat and, and bald and other things that are not entirely untrue, but also, I'm not sure what the point is.
Someone's out of proper academic argument when they start.
I may be fat and bald, but I am not blind, Kara. So,
so what? Kurt, why is that side of the argument? Why are they so agitated? Are they what are they worried about? Are they worried about anything, or they just don't believe Craig and they get annoyed with the fact that he's saying I'm Satoshi? I don't think he is. And I'm happy to sort of share my reasons. I might be completely wrong, because ultimately all my reasons are based on a little bit of research, not much. I haven't got any evidence. So I know for a fact, I've got to be sort of proportional to a certain extent, because has somebody showed me the actual evidence to prove anything? Do I actually care? No, not really. Not enough. Not enough to care to really be bothered to.
And I think that's a healthy place to start.
I'm not tribal. I'm not. I can. Right. I hold a number of different coins. So to me, it makes no odds. But it's just really interesting. But one thing I did pick up on, which I did do a little bit of digging earlier, and it was just interesting how on the BSV website, the timeline of events that they said, the fork, Bitcoin forked after BSV and things like that, or whatever it was. Yeah. It seemed sort of out of kilt with the timeline of how it's portrayed everywhere else. And I just sort of think, well, why is that? Is it just they're trying to position themselves as they've never forked effectively and everyone else forked first? Does it really matter ultimately? And if it doesn't really matter, then why not just be truthful with the way that things happened?
Sure.
Because I think credibility and truth is really important, because I think the only thing for me, and again, this is really judgmental, and I recognize that, but Craig does come across as a little bit of a know-it-all and a bit slimy car salesman type thing. And again, that might be really unfair. Yeah. But that's just, my take on it. And again, I'd happily, meet him, chat with him, and have my opinion changed.
Holy shit. Lot to unpack there.
yeah, that's you're gonna need a notepad. So I think to start, the fact that he comes across as kind of a know-it-all, I think you have to start by being clear. Like, Craig has like 20 postgraduate degrees in things like math, computer science, statistics, philosophy, accounting, cyber forensics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's a very, very educated man. He's also super autistic. Like he has Asperger's. And so for him, as soon as you start to sort of push him into a corner, he's going to push back way harder than he probably should. And a lot of that is his neurodivergence. Like he's like that one-on-one over drinks too. So like that's like he does himself no favors in the way that he sort of interfaces with pressure with people.
And again, a lot of those moments are often caught in little clips, so you don't necessarily see the full context or all the rest of it. So I get that.
Yeah, and so
what about the timeline of the way that things are presented in terms of the and for me, I'm like like I said, I think doesn't really matter, and if it doesn't matter, why is other people presenting it differently? I don't understand.
I think if it doesn't matter, then probably none of it matters, and there's a non-zero chance that none of it matters, as my attitude might imply about the blockchain space in general. But it's funny because a lot of this terminology is about like what's popular today, and if you actually look at what Satoshi said, if you just take Craig out of the picture and talk about Bitcoin and talk about the way that Bitcoin was supposed to have been upgraded, Satoshi was actually very clear about not just conceptually, but also gave like minor code snippets about like, okay, if you want to upgrade the block size limit, this is precisely how I would recommend that it's done. And then the way that was done, which is what people think of as a hard fork today, has been thrown out as saying like, no, that's something like that's the unbreakable rule of Bitcoin, is that you can never hard fork and upgrade. To which I say like, well, okay, like why did the culture get to decide that the architect of the system was wrong about the nature of the system's governance? So that strikes me, I'll often call that the coup. I call it the Bitcoin Civil War, or I'll call it the Bitcoin coup d'etat.
This is what was called the blockchain wars, wasn't it?
Yeah, people call it the block size war or the scaling war as well is a common thing. But more than scaling, like it's not really about the block size. It really is about governance. And here's the thing, like Satoshi Nakamoto is the issuer of Bitcoin. And so it's issued by a pseudonym so that it doesn't become essentially a security. Like what I was saying about Justin Sun, it's like, well, this guy just issued the damn thing and just prints himself money and he's a crook, And I think if Bitcoin was issued by a human, whether it be Craig or anybody else, it automatically has that sort of like, okay, these are like McDonald's tokens, just like anything else. It becomes much more trivial. But when you create this pseudonym, Satoshi Nakamoto, it sort of takes that personality and power away from it, which I think all Bitcoiners agree is essentially a good idea. But where they diverge, it is fantastic. It's brilliant.
It is. It's going to make a Netflix brilliant movie one day. It's
yes. Now, the problem, however, is that most of the early Bitcoiners were anarchists. And so they have this fundamental problem with intellectual property, which is non-physical property. This is like, do you own a song? Do you own a melody? Like things like that. And an anarchist would say no, like there is no digital property. And so the problem is that Satoshi Nakamoto issued the protocol with license. So he issued it with an MIT license, but the MIT license was very, very clear that if you make a fundamental change to the underlying protocol, that change needs to be reissued under a new name. And so that would be like Litecoin, for example, is essentially a reissuing of Bitcoin with a slightly different algorithm and a slightly different couple of things, basically just the supply, the block size limit, and the mining algorithm. And Satoshi Nakamoto would not have any problem with that. That's in compliance with the license. However, if you take Bitcoin, what they did is they created what's called the BIP system. So it's the Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. And then this concept of soft forking, which means that regardless of if you run a node or anything else, that a soft fork that has gone through this BIP process where developers can make a very deep and underlying protocol change to the way that Bitcoin works, that nodes will not come out of consensus. In fact, if you don't upgrade to the newest version of the node that contains that new soft fork, you can't even validate what the change was. So you have now just become a slave node in that system to whatever the developers have decided that new system is. And so by that system, we've seen things like SegWit and Taproot and some of these other things, which some people would say, hey, these are great technical, these are leaps and bounds. And maybe they are. I don't want to criticize them on technical merits, because in many regards, they are quite elegant pieces of software. The problem is that the way that they were pushed through is outside of the governance of Bitcoin. So it made it that the longest chain and the most proof of work literally can't do anything. They can't even read what was changed unless they just follow the leader. And then secondarily, you have, kind of this backlash that we've seen with people saying like, hey, ordinals tokens, for example, has been a huge thing where it's like, oh, they used SegWit and Taproot and all these things to do this stuff to our ledger that we didn't want done. And they're complaining about the fact that their protocol change had spillover effects that they don't like. And that's just one example of Bitcoin not working when you get it out of balance with the way that it was architected. It was architected to be a sound money, and a sound money doesn't change. Like, it doesn't matter if we all hate gold, we can't vote to change gold. Gold is gold. That's why gold is valuable. Now, Bitcoin does change, or, well, BTC does change. Craig would argue that Bitcoin is a fundamental concept, and that can't change. So if you make a change to Bitcoin and you call that new change Bitcoin, you're not actually Bitcoin. You are being dishonest, or you're just ignorant to what you've done. But either way, you don't have the right to change Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto is the issuer, and Bitcoin has a very, very clear definition. And so therefore, your deeply complex change, something like SegWit or Taproot, is therefore not Bitcoin. So you have created a completely new protocol that isn't Bitcoin. And I'm not going to call it Bitcoin. I'm not going to agree that you had the right to do it. I don't care if it's popular. I don't care if it's worth $2 trillion in market cap. Bitcoin is Bitcoin. And so our minority split off the network that has maintained the rules of Bitcoin, are Bitcoin, even if only 100 people on Earth know that it's Bitcoin. And B, look at what we've done with it. We're the most scalable proof of work blockchain in the history of all of the technology. And everything that everybody said was impossible, we've actually spent the last 5 or 6 years proving is actually possible in the original Bitcoin protocol. And so Craig is very, very controversial, and he undermines trillions of dollars of money that's been created out of basically nowhere. But I think he has a very deep philosophical point, and it matters. And if the truth doesn't matter, then I don't know that Bitcoin mattered in the first place. And so that's kind of where guys like Craig or guys like myself, I happen to agree with him on this point.
Yeah.
That's where we fall on it.
So Kurt, so fundamentally, the timings of things do matter because of obviously what you just laid out. The way I read it was Bitcoin wanted to make a fundamental change. So, right, I'm not technical, so bear with me, right? So this is like layman's terms, but actually, I think it's actually quite important for to explain things in really simple terms, because most of the audience aren't technical, and this is where I think often these crypto talks on YouTube get so technical, and people just like start glazing over. As I understand it, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Bitcoin wanted to introduce some sort of change, and this is when the Lightning Network was basically came about, but they didn't want to increase the block size, and there was a group which became Bitcoin Cash that basically made as I understand it, sort of I guess if this proposal goes through, we've got a backup plan, and our backup plan is to do a fork and we'll create Bitcoin Cash. So the way I read that is Bitcoin did their fork to allow Lightning. After that event, then Bitcoin Cash forked because they didn't like it and wanted to increase the block size. Is that right? Do I understand that correctly? It
was actually flipped. So you have to go through the whole 2016 to late 2017. In 2016, there was the Hong Kong Agreement. This is where basically all the developers and miners and a lot of commercial interests got together and agreed that it was necessary for Bitcoin to scale in some way. Now, they didn't go across any specifics. Proposals like Lightning Network, the SegWit upgrade, which allows Lightning, and various other things. Like, okay, so then it was a give and take. It was like, okay, if we agree to the SegWit upgrade, will you agree to also make the block size limit 2 megabytes instead of 1? And there was kind of a soft handshake on a lot of these things. Everybody felt like, okay, I think this is going to work out. Then the New York agreement happened about a year later to kind of solidify, okay, we've really figured out what we're going to do. It's going to be called SegWit 2X. We're definitely going to agree to the SegWit upgrade, the 2 megabyte hard fork upgrade. You guys are working on Lightning Network. We're willing to support that being like everybody had compromised a bit, and it was an uneasy piece, but everybody was like, look, this is just generally good for us to all compromise a little bit and stay together. That was in mid 2017. Well, then about 2 months before that hard fork was supposed to occur for this upgrade, all of a sudden, a group of people, primarily people at Blockstream, which is the biggest developer firm in the Bitcoin space, started saying, you know what, we're going to renege on this. SegWit 2X is a scam, like no hard fork. The only changes to the Bitcoin protocol should be by soft fork and all this stuff. So all of a sudden it became like really political. And really
why did they
toxic.
jump in there? Why did they suddenly, like, everyone was sort of on board, there's compromise made? It sounds like a bit of a lover's tiff. I don't know what's going on.
There's probably a very reasonable response to that. For me, it's always been look at who's funding them. Yeah, it's money and power. So Blockstream is a venture capital funded startup. Their biggest investors are AXA, which is, I think, the biggest insurance company in Europe. They got money from MasterCard Ventures, New York Life Insurance. And so you start looking at like, okay, so what are their values about Bitcoin, right? And I look at that and say, like, look, they don't want to disrupt the payment space. They don't want to disrupt the insurance space. They don't want to disrupt where they're in control, right? So they do like this idea of financialization of a new asset. Like if you can just pump value into a new thing, you can start to create new money kind of out of nowhere. And we sort of have this pump and dump economy as a response to that. But, the flip side, the people that ultimately became your Bitcoin cashers, they looked at it and said, guys, we've just spent 2 years agreeing to and then building out and then implementing this roadmap. And now with 60 days to go, all of a sudden you guys are pulling the rug on us and saying, hey, no, we're going to do like SegWit 2X is dead. Like we're like this whole thing. We're going to do what we want. So then it was a scramble to create a client that would keep Bitcoin. That was really the only goal. It was like, okay, SegWit is a huge fundamental change to Bitcoin. We were willing to compromise on it if we were all going to go together, but now they're stabbing us in the back. And so now we're going to roll back on our part of the agreement. We're going to keep the original Bitcoin what it is. You guys do your monstrosity Lightning Network SegWit stuff, because it is a lot of changes. If you really look at what's happening in SegWit, it is it's not Bitcoin. That's not how Bitcoin works fundamentally. And so it turned into a PR war, and it literally was litigated and fought over on Twitter by people, with their hashtags, and everybody's wearing these camouflage hats that say no 2X on them. And like people were getting like DDoS attacks. There were whole ISPs that were taken off the internet. It got really, really, really nasty. Jameson Lopp, who's a kind of a famous Bitcoin developer, he got swatted. There was police kicking his door down. And then a bunch of people just quit. A lot of very valuable people basically went to Twitter and said, you know what? Somebody called and threatened to kill my family. I quit. You guys are all losers. Goodbye. And
it's like, why does it have to get to that level? It's just pathetic. I mean, obviously people fall out, business, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I guess it's just it's the same reasons people fall out now, isn't it? It's just a bit of a shame. We can't all. What I find a huge shame is this whole space will just. Surely we're all trying to fight for the same ultimate cause. And it's like, well, can we not just all get on and just like try and, rather than infight like petulant children in the playgrounds? I don't know. I just don't get it. But
I think
there's obviously,
it's
ideological. Power, there's money, there's ego, there's all these sort of things, isn't there? And different visions. People got different visions.
I think it's the same reason why a casual observer might say, like, man, why can't the Israelis and the Palestinians get along? It just doesn't seem like that big of a deal, And it's like, sorry, you're talking about thousands of years of deep political, ethnic, religious divide, and like they hate each other for a million reasons. And I think Bitcoin's the same way. Like we're trying to, like, this isn't just a pump money and get rich thing. Like for a lot of people, this is, look, we are trying to change the face of the global economy. We want to eliminate the way that humans interface with money, which is probably the most important technical relationship that we have in any, I mean, with like, think about what is the global economy, right? It is us interacting with each other and using money as a medium, not just to value economics, but really to value everything. And so the implications of it are really big. And so you get people that are very passionate about it for philosophical reasons. And then when you might have to admit, like, hey, you've made a lot of money or you've accrued a lot of power, but you've done it in a way that is wrong, is false in some way. Like this is actually what Craig is threatening. Like when Craig shows up and every unpopular idea about Bitcoin, he shows up and says, no, that's exactly what I intended. I'm the creator. And you guys are all not just wrong, but foolish and maybe evil. Well, then all of a sudden it's just like, okay, Craig is bad. Like definitely keep Craig out of the crypto conference because he just wants us to all be poor because he's angry. And so I think that's really fundamentally what undergirds the, like, you know what? I don't want to hear anything Craig has to say because it's just negative. And to a point, I get that. But at the same time, if the technology really matters, like I'm a big fan of hearing people out. I always give everybody a chance. And every time I give Craig a chance, like I learn something and that's not real common. So.
No, definitely. Awesome. Will, do you want to sort of jump in with any sort of thoughts or any questions?
To be honest with you, I'm just enjoying listening. I genuinely find Kurt's opinion quite refreshing and quite relatable to my own. I think that in lots of ways, I think the space has got a little bit lost in their way. I'm very fundamentalist in the idea of where the technology originally came from and where it's trying to solve in the world. So I find a lot of your opinion, Kurt, very relatable. And it's, for me, I'm interested. I'm enjoying and interested in listening to your kind of perspective, especially kind of your day-to-day role as well, and where that comes from, and the kind of people you get to talk to. So I find it very
thank you, Will.
Okay, how are you doing for time? How are you doing for time? Because
I can hang out.
Questions, but I'm conscious that
I teach a Brazilian jiu-jitsu class that starts in 90 minutes. So in theory, I could stay for another hour if you wanted me.
Well, let's wrap it up. I've got loads of questions. To be fair, I'm quite tired.
Actually, to that point, Kara was trying to I think solicit me to get into some kind of a celebrity boxing match or something to that effect. Funny. I don't know if she's aware that I'm like, I don't want to oversell myself, but I was the MMA coach at Carlson Gracie MMA in Chicago. Like I used to train with like Stephan Bonner and like UFC legends. Like I have trained 4 UFC fighters, one of which who fought for lightweight title. And I'm still a Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach, competitor. I've got 50 medals on my wall in the bedroom. So
don't mess with Kurt, everybody. Okay.
Right. I'm 6'3" and weigh 270 pounds. Like I'm about as, I'm not in the greatest shape in the universe, but like I lift every day. I compete. Like I'm, carry a little fluff around because I'm also a dad, but I'm not unfamiliar with how to use my body when necessary.
Well, it'd be quite, I think it's quite funny concepts actually. Get some, influencers, because they were doing it with ex-professional footballers. Doing a few, charity boxing matches that they're always quite entertaining. But we'll see.
I totally would. If somebody raises a big purse, like I'd fight. It'd be great. I would love to.
Awesome. I can see this happening.
One question before we go, and obviously, if you Google Craig Wright, obviously typically the written thing is that it's sort of quite universally agreed that he isn't Satoshi. Do you? And I don't really have a dog in this fight. I don't know enough potentially about all the personalities involved. Do you believe that he is? And if so, what makes you have that belief?
I believe Craig Wright. Yeah, so it's a little bit of a complicated question for all kinds of reasons, but I think Craig Wright, the best way to put it is that Craig Wright created the character Satoshi Nakamoto. I believe he wrote the Bitcoin white paper, and I think fundamentally he was Bitcoin's architect. Now, do other people deserve credit? Yes. Like there are other people that were involved, some of them known, some of them not. Guys like Hal Finney, for example, were involved on basically day zero, that kind of thing. But Craig, the reason that I think it's Craig is when you talk. So I like to build things. I used to build cars, that kind of thing. I was kind of a Volkswagen nerd. Like rebuild an engine, rebuild a transmission, that kind of thing. You do it a few times, you start to learn like, okay, well, here's what the manual says, but if I do it this way, you can start to eat stuff out. Yeah, once you start to understand a system, you can make the system better. Now, I've seen Craig, and I know lots of Bitcoin developers and things too. Like I have spoken to these people, and like everybody's very obsessed with telling you what Bitcoin can't do, or like, here's why we needed Ethereum and these kind of things. But if you talk to Craig, and I've known Craig for a number of years now, and so I used to ask Craig occasionally, be like, hey, and this is the same thing. I have a cybersecurity background. I would work on stuff too. And I'd send my question to a few people. I'd say, okay, look, if I was going to do this in Bitcoin and I was to use these scripts and program it this way, I would get very dismissive, short answers out of basically everybody. But the second I would ask a technical question, like high level, like, hey, how would you implement this? I would get a response out of him that was very like, I'm really glad to hear you ask it this way. So if you use this opcode, which did you know nobody's ever used this opcode on mainnet ever in the history of Bitcoin, but here's why it's there. And then he goes into like, here's how you can use it. And then if you do this and this at the same time, then it allows you to. So he would get into like this very deep. It's like he had engineered the car that nobody had driven. But if you asked him the right question, like he would light up like a dad talking about his children that he's proud of. And like, like maybe he's crazy, but also like if I have tried the things he's recommended, you start to see like, oh wow, it does work that way. Like that's really, I would not have guessed that in a million years that it works that way. But consistently, again and again, if you ask him very deep systemic questions about the how and the why, and can you show me? Like he can show you more than anyone on earth can show you about Bitcoin. And he will show you things that the supposed experts, the kind of guys that would be on CNN or NBC or writing for Bitcoin Magazine would tell you are impossible. That Bitcoin can't do that. That's not how Bitcoin works. And Craig will spend 15 minutes showing you not only does it work, but here's this gigantic, abundant cornucopia of stuff that you can do with it if you try it this way. And so I take stuff like that and say, like, how could he have such an intimate knowledge of a system that, again, has never been used for what he's saying it could be used for? I can't lay that to rest on top of all of his other claims, on all of his, like, hey, I was working on a token system, like his backstory. So during the era when Satoshi would have been building Bitcoin, Craig was being paid by Lassiter's Casino, which is the largest casino in the Pacific Australian region, on a token system to bring money offshore and into their casino in a way that it couldn't be charged back. Well,
interesting.
As a very simple version, like you could see, okay, so he took some research and development money to try to build this system, and parts of it became Bitcoin, basically. And here's a fun fact about Bitcoin. If you go into the original implementation of code, there is the vestigial code of a poker game is built into the first Bitcoin client. And Satoshi Nakamoto, just a few days after it was released, very quietly pulled that code out of Bitcoin. But if you have the original, you have a poker game in that client. And so Craig, who was working for a casino to build a token system to get payments from like 2005 to 2008 into Lassiter's Casino, he claims he built Bitcoin instead because Lassiter's didn't like the system, but Bitcoin had a poker client built into it. And like, so that kind of thing is like, okay, so Satoshi Nakamoto, we know Satoshi Nakamoto had a poker client in mind with Bitcoin. We don't know if it was commercial or if it was just, whatever, maybe he copy and pasted something that he wasn't supposed to, but so it's things like that. There's lots of circumstantial stuff. and then the knowledge of the system is next to no one.
So I guess then the final follow-up question to that is, why then when you Google his name, does it say that it's sort of almost I think it even says universally accepted?
Yeah.
So what is it? Why do people not believe him then? Again, coming from a person with no dog in this fight.
The very basic version is that when he was asked, I think it was probably first by the BBC, like, hey, Satoshi Nakamoto would have Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin private keys. Can you move a Bitcoin? Rory Kellen-Jones, who's one of the greatest journalists in the UK, I think sent him something like half a bit. Well, yeah, sure. I'm an American. I don't know. He's just a name I know. But he sent Satoshi like half a Bitcoin, and Craig was like, "Yeah, I'll send it back to you," and he never did. And then it was like, "Oh, can you sign? Like, can you use the Bitcoin private keys to make a cryptographic sign a message, basically using those keys?" And Satoshi should be able to do that with his keys very trivially. It should be like a 2-second thing. And he has refused to do it, including in times when it was set up with like big PR and like, hey, he's going to do it live on TV, and like ended up not doing it. And so people look at that and just say, man, Occam's razor says if it would take 2 seconds to prove he has Satoshi's keys, why wouldn't he do it?
Yeah.
Now, Craig, being Craig, has a 50 million word response to that because he's super autistic. And he says, well, Bitcoin's not an identity system. Bitcoin's a privacy system. Read section 10 of the Bitcoin white paper where I explained that, and she goes into like, keys aren't identity, and like keys being like property being identity, or possession of property being a key aspect of identity is actually a Marxist principle. So like if you talk to like real communists, they'll talk about the difference between private property and personal property. And so when Bitcoiners start saying like, well, if Satoshi's Bitcoin would be Satoshi's personal property, and so he should be able to prove possession of it. Like, it's a very communist principle. And Craig is very much a libertarian and explains like, no, if I agree to that possession is an aspect of identity, it actually undermines Bitcoin for all these reasons. And, so it's like, is it crazy? Like, yes, it's crazy. Craig is a neurodivergent crazy person, but also, if you look at it's now been 7 or 8 years of his own reputation and money and time, and then all this stuff, like he's still here, despite the fact that he's the most unpopular man in Bitcoin. And like, I couldn't see him doing that if it wasn't ultimately because it's his baby, it's his passion, it's his legacy. And so ultimately, I don't know. Like, if it was me, I'm a very average person in many regards. And if the whole world hated me and I had the ability to sign a message, like I'd probably sign the message. But but that would be the same kind of thing. Like, I'm too normal of a person to have designed a system like Bitcoin, and I would have expected Satoshi Nakamoto to be a very different kind of person.
Yes.
And so it kind of is what it is. I just think, regardless of what you believe, it's like the juiciest question mark in Bitcoin. And I'm here for it.
I love. I said this in the last episode that I did with Ben. I think that mysticism around it is almost one of the key draws. No one knows who started this revolution. So almost in a way, you don't want to ever find out, really, because it sort of ruins that mysticism. So.
It's the makings of every good religion. You can have. There are whole university courses about whether or not Jesus Christ actually existed. Like, was he really a person?
Exactly.
And well, there's 2-3 billion people that have based their whole lives on it. So it is what it is.
No, that's fascinating. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. Kurt, one last question. Do you hold anything other than Bitcoin or BSV or whatever you hold?
Not really. In fact, I got out of most of my Bitcoin in 2017, during the big bull run. I started buying back. I kept my original Bitcoin. I got my first Bitcoins in 2012. It was like 3 Bitcoins for like $20 a piece. And somebody paid me to do like $150 job at the company that I owned at the time. Amazing. And so I've held on to those. So those are my unsplit Bitcoins. If any version of Bitcoin goes to $1 million, I'll have $3 million worth of Bitcoin at that point. And so there's that. But ultimately, no, I don't really buy, hold, trade much at all. But I'm also basically debt free. Like I used my Bitcoin in 2017 to just kind of pay off most of my normal stuff. And so I don't have a big debt burden in my life. And I get to have an independent opinion about Bitcoin. So my advice to people, and I guess this could be construed as investment advice, but it's like depoliticize your portfolio. If you hold one BTC for $27,000 or whatever it's worth today, well, it costs you $35 to buy one BSV and like $200 to buy one BCH. And now, no matter which version of Bitcoin wins, you're completely hedged, like in a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. And so I think that's a pretty easy way to simplify and depoliticize your portfolio. But for me, it's primarily BSV because I'm in the BSV economy. Like I own a BSV mining pool and all of that stuff. And then I have my like 3-ish unsplit Bitcoins, which are inherently like a Bitcoin basket currency.
Because wasn't that what happened when they went from Bitcoin to Bitcoin Cash? Everyone just basically still had the Bitcoin, but then
a lot of people sold. They treated it as a dividend. So it's like, oh, cool, got this Bitcoin Cash. I'll just sell it and buy more BTC. So, which in the last 5 years has been a great financial decision, but ultimately it also makes you very toxic because you've lost your exposure to other ideas about Bitcoin, basically.
And just I was just wrapping it up, but it just came to my mind. So did BSV then spin out of Bitcoin Cash?
Yes. So in 2018, we still really, the dust hadn't settled from the Bitcoin Cash split from BTC. And so basically we were having the similar thing, like, okay, let's restore all of the original Bitcoin opcodes. Like, let's just restore the original Bitcoin because it's been kind of stripped away over the last, at the time, 7 or 8 years. And so
was there another internal sort of conflict between sort of parties within that?
Pretty much. Yeah. It was the Bitcoin Cash team. It was guys like Amaury Sachet and Roger Ver and Jihan Wu. And then on the other side, it was folks like myself and people like Craig Wright and a few other players, CoinGeek Mining and things at the time. And ultimately we underestimated their guile over in the Bitcoin Cash camp. Like we wanted to upgrade and eliminate the block size limit and restore the original Bitcoin stack. And they were like, well, if you can beat us, like we'll have a hash war. We're going to do this the Bitcoin way. Whichever version gets the most proof of work wins and the other one orphans. Like that's how it works. And in the 11th hour, they pushed out a private client to like Coinbase and BitPay and basically all the kind of the economic actors in the economy and said, hey, run this private client no matter how much hash power those SV people have. It won't reorg. We won't be orphaned. So they sort of negotiated for a permanent technological split in private while the people on the SV side were like, we had shaken hands for kind of a gentlemanly, like, look, whoever wins is the real Bitcoin Cash and we'll all break bread after. And I hope we're all happier for it. And so it was another big backstab from us, which is, unfortunate. So I like to say, like, we're the real Bitcoin and the real Bitcoin Cash, if you can stomach the conversation. But
it's not going to be another split down the road, is there?
I sure hope not. I mean, splits are destructive. Like they plainly are. It's failure to cooperate. And frankly, I think it's shameful in the history of Bitcoin because like it's a tool to facilitate economic cooperation. But if every time we decide we don't like people, we split off and create our own money, like it diminishes network effects. It's bad for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Kurt, let's wrap it up, mate. That was fantastic. Really appreciate you coming on. The clash was great. We've obviously had your perspective, which was really appreciated. That's great. I certainly don't pretend to be an expert, so I really appreciate you coming on. So anyone out there who's on the other side of the argument, it'd be great to get them on, and then maybe you both have a chance to see each other's arguments and we can get you both on at the same time if we can make that happen. And
I'd love it.
Just have a good old debate and all the rest of it. So it's just really interesting. And I think if we can have these grown up conversations and try and sort of understand each other, there's room in the space for everybody. That's the way I look at it. And the market will decide ultimately. But Kurt, that's brilliant. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, guys. for all you subscribers and watchers and viewers, thanks so much for watching, of course. And don't forget, give it a like, and we'll catch up with you soon. Take care, guys.
Thank you.